Europe in the late 1930s. The continent at peace, but uneasy. The wounds of the previous war had not yet healed. Economic depression had crippled nations and broken hope. Across Germany, a new and dangerous power was rising. The summer of 1939. The last summer of peace. Newspapers warned of crisis after crisis across the continent. September 1, 1939. Armored columns crossed the Polish border at dawn. Within hours, Britain and France declared war on Germany. Across Europe, families gathered around radios and feared the worst. The world had gone to war again. Polish cavalry rode out bravely against tanks and aircraft. Stuka dive bombers screamed down from the sky. Warsaw fought on as the city burned around its defenders. Then on September 17, the Soviet army crossed from the east. Poland fell, divided between two powers. On the Western Front, French troops manned the Maginot Line. The British Expeditionary Force arrived in France. Through the long winter, both sides waited. This was the strange period called the Phony War. Then in April 1940, Norway and Denmark were invaded. In May 1940, the storm finally broke. Armored columns burst through the Ardennes forest. At Sedan, German forces crossed the Meuse River. French defenses collapsed within days. Allied armies were pushed back toward the coast. Hundreds of thousands of British and French troops gathered at Dunkirk. They waited on the open beach for evacuation. Civilian boats answered the call across the channel. The little ships of Dunkirk made the great rescue. 330,000 soldiers were saved. On June 14, 1940, Paris fell. France signed an armistice in a forest railway carriage. In London, Winston Churchill stood firm. "We shall fight on the beaches," he told the world. Britain stood alone against the conqueror of Europe. RAF pilots scrambled to their Spitfires at every alarm. Spitfire and Hurricane fighters lifted off to defend the island. Wave after wave of bombers crossed the English Channel. The skies over Kent filled with twisting dogfights. Britain endured, day after day. At night, London burned during the Blitz. Families slept in underground tube stations. Firefighters battled the fires until dawn. St. Paul's Cathedral stood through it all, silhouetted against fires. Children were evacuated to the countryside for safety. The King and Queen walked among bombed neighborhoods. The Desert War began in North Africa. British and Commonwealth troops faced extreme heat and sand. Field Marshal Rommel led the Afrika Korps with great skill. 3 million Axis troops massed along the Soviet border. On June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa was launched. The largest land invasion in history rolled east. Soviet defenses were caught completely off guard. Vast encirclements trapped Soviet armies. Leningrad was surrounded for nearly 900 days. Moscow itself was approached by December. Then the Russian winter arrived with brutal cold. Fresh Siberian troops arrived in time to save the capital. T-34 tanks rolled forward in the Soviet counterattack. Axis forces were pushed back from Moscow. December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor at dawn. Japanese aircraft swept in from the Pacific. American battleships burned in the harbor. Roosevelt asked Congress for a declaration of war. Volunteers lined up at recruitment offices the next day. Across the Pacific, Japanese forces advanced rapidly. Singapore fell in February 1942. American forces in the Philippines retreated to Bataan. The daring Doolittle raid struck back at Japan. The Battle of the Coral Sea was fought beyond visual range. At Midway in June 1942, the tide turned. American dive bombers found the Japanese carriers. 4 Japanese carriers were lost in a single day. American Marines waded ashore at Guadalcanal. The long Pacific Campaign had begun. Henderson Field became the strategic key to the South Pacific. At Stalingrad, the largest battle in history began. Soviet and Axis forces fought building by building. Snipers haunted the ruins on both sides. The frozen Volga became a lifeline of supplies. In February 1943, the surrounded 6th Army surrendered. At El Alamein, British tanks broke the Axis line. The 8th Army advanced across the desert. Rommel's forces retreated toward Tunisia. North Africa was won by spring 1943. Allied forces landed in Sicily in July 1943. Italy surrendered in September. The long battle for Monte Cassino raged through winter. Polish troops finally raised their flag on the ruins. Rome was liberated in June 1944. On June 6, 1944, the greatest invasion fleet ever assembled crossed the Channel. Paratroopers jumped into Normandy in the pre-dawn darkness. Landing craft approached the beaches at first light. American soldiers waded ashore at Omaha Beach. British and Canadians landed at Sword, Juno, and Gold. Naval bombardment supported the troops on every beach. Rangers climbed the cliffs at Point du Hoc. Mulberry harbors were assembled to supply the invasion. Soldiers fought through the deadly Normandy hedgerows. The city of Caen was contested for weeks. Then the breakout came in late July. Patton's Third Army raced across France. The French resistance emerged in cities everywhere. Paris was liberated in August 1944. Crowds celebrated in the Champs-Élysées. Operation Market Garden tried to seize the bridges to Germany. The bridge at Arnhem was a bridge too far. In December 1944, surprise came in the Ardennes. The Battle of the Bulge raged in the snow. American defenders at Bastogne refused to surrender. Clear weather brought Allied air power back. The bulge in the line was straightened. Soviet T-34s rolled west across Poland. American forces crossed the Rhine at Remagen. Marines raised the flag on Mount Suribachi at Iwo Jima. The black sand of Iwo Jima cost thousands of lives. The Battle of Okinawa was the largest of the Pacific. Kamikaze attacks struck Allied ships off the coast. Soviet armies closed in on Berlin in April 1945. The Battle of Berlin raged through the ruined capital. American and Soviet soldiers met at the Elbe River. The Soviet flag was raised over the Reichstag. On May 8, 1945, Europe celebrated VE Day. Times Square filled with joyful crowds. Trafalgar Square in London was a sea of people. Scientists at Los Alamos completed the Manhattan Project. The Trinity test split the dawn over New Mexico. The B-29 Enola Gay flew its historic mission. On August 6, 1945, a mushroom cloud rose over Hiroshima. 3 days later, Nagasaki was struck. Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender on the radio. On September 2, the surrender was signed aboard the USS Missouri. 6 years of war finally ended. American soldiers returned home on troop ships. Families reunited on the docks of every port. European cities began the long task of rebuilding. The Marshall Plan sent supplies and aid across the ocean. The United Nations was founded in San Francisco. Europe was divided by the Iron Curtain. The Berlin airlift kept the western sectors alive. Nuremberg held the trials of justice. Across Europe, a slow peace took hold. The lessons were carved in stone, in cemeteries everywhere. The American cemetery at Normandy. Row upon row of white crosses.